Hello, everyone, and welcome to Shawna's presentation today. And before we get started, I'm just going to introduce myself. My name is Bill Situ. I can see there are a lot of familiar faces here. Most of you have here probably met me at some point or another. And then I'm also joined by two of my other colleagues here who also have their cameras on, Shawna Cole and Deborah Shack. And all three of us are ELT specialists. ELT meaning English language teaching. I will go ahead and introduce Shawna in just a moment, but before I do, I'd just like to clarify a couple things regarding our branding. So first things first is previously you might have known us under different brand names such as Pearson AirP or AirP ELT, but as of currently, our branding is TC Media ELT, as you can see in my background here, as well as the backgrounds of my colleagues Chantal and Deborah, and also Shawna's. So this is our current branding. Presently, we are under the ownership of TC Media Books. So that's our parent company. And in terms of the resources, they have more or less remained the same. It's just our branding that has changed. So any textbook products that you may have seen in the past, such as Connections or Leap or Advanced in Academic Writing, those are essentially unchanged as of this point. So again, Shawna has kindly agreed to deliver this presentation today, and you can already see on the screen what it's going to be about. It's going to be about social emotional learning, or SEL. Something that very commonly does get overlooked in the area of language teaching, but very essential nonetheless. I just also like to let everyone know that this session will be recorded, and there is a question and answer or Q&A session at the very end. And at that point, the recording will stop. Therefore, if you do not wish to appear on camera, then by all means, you can feel free to turn your cameras off. And now I'm just going to give a quick introduction of Shawna. So Shawna is the author of one of our flagship series, which is Connections. And speaking of that, I am one of the representatives of that series. So if you are interested in this book series, then you would reach out to me. If you are outside of Quebec, or if you're from Quebec, then your representative would be either Chantal or Deborah, so my two other colleagues here. Shawna has 15 years of experience, actually more than 15, in ESL, and she has served this role in various capacities as a teacher, as an administrator, as well as a curriculum developer. She has, in fact, hosted workshops internationally over the past decade, and in recent years, she has been a freelance consultant who has developed more than 30 programs and courses for various corporations, ESL schools, as well as private career colleges here in Canada. And she also does a professional development training for educators in the area of instructional design. So she definitely brings a wealth of experience and expertise in this field. And today, her topic is definitely one that's going to be relevant to all of us here. Without further ado, I am now going to hand over the floor to our guest of honor today, Shawna, and the stage is yours. So go right ahead.
Thank you for that. Trying really hard not to blush. It's hard when you hear someone say all the amazing things that you've done. You just got my resume in the last 2 minutes. But thank you. Thanks for joining us today. I want to talk about social emotional learning, which is maybe something that you've become familiar with, as it's very common in the K through 12 system. And what I'm starting to do is look at this and how it can be applied to English language teaching classes or language classes, but then also in the corporate world. So you're going to hear me talk a little bit about both of those things today. And just recently, I got back from a conference just a couple days ago, and the gentleman, Mr. Eric Bailey, had this as his opening. And so, forgive my picture, but I took a picture of his slide because I thought this was incredible. So I was like, I'm going to steal this for my webinar next week, but give him credit, of course. So Eric Bailey designed this. And just for a moment, take a look at the grid and let me know how you're feeling. How are you feeling right now? You could just type in like D6 or A8 and just type it in the chat. A2. Okay. Smiley face. Love it. Good. A2 so far. A common answer. C2. I like it. A little winky face. Thank you. B3s and E3s coming in. Let's take a look. I love it. Some silly faces. I think I might put myself a little bit. Oh, I don't see one with a mask. I should have to include that one. I'm feeling a little under the weather today, so excuse my sniffles. F2. Okay, love it. Little kissy face. Okay, so that was just a way to get us warmed up today and get us thinking and, well, talking or chatting about our emotions, which you'll hear me come back to quite a lot throughout the presentation. But yeah, this was my warm-up. Feel free to use it. Just give Eric M. Bailey some credit if you would like to redesign it and use it for yourself. Okay, so this topic, social emotional learning, why now? You know, there is an increase in AI, which is going to impact, speaking and writing and the different tools like Grammarly Go or Duolingo. We also have some learner isolation because we're maybe still learning in asynchronous or hybrid environments. There's also an increased focus on student well-being. So this is why social emotional learning is a good thing to talk about. There's increased attention, on trauma-informed teaching, and that's not something that I'm going to explicitly cover in this presentation today, but feel free to reach out to me because if this is something that you want to learn more about or talk more about, I do have some information that I can pass on about how to maybe implement social emotional learning in the classroom, taking a more sensitive approach through trauma-informed practices. And then also we're seeing a focus on transferable skills. And so that's why I think, with how language education is evolving and AI is reshaping how we learn and how we write, emotional safety and belonging have become essential in a classroom. Well, really, they've become essential in a workplace and a classroom and in your own family, in your own living room, everywhere, but we're going to focus on the classroom right now. All right. And I have a quote here for us. And it's, some scientists believe that cognitive achievement is 50% of the equation and social emotional skills are the other 50% of the equation. And so I'm sharing this with you because it's not just the brain work that we need to consider. We need to consider how we encourage people to have relationships with each other, and how we're able to foster having deep conversations and take in other people's perspectives, because learning is not just about brain work. There's heart work in it as well. And also, thinking of the affective side, this is what I mentioned before. Excuse me. The affective side has been something that's talked about for a long time, but maybe not gotten as much attention as it needs. And the affective side has to do with different aspects of our emotional well-being. Affective factors link what's important for us in the world of people around us and the situations and the happenings and what we are able to make of them. Our feeling, our mood or attitude, the condition in which behavior shows up, and this impacts language learning as well. And I'm going to talk about Stephen Krashen right now, and if you've heard of him, great, and if you haven't, this is food for thought for you, something for you to look into more. But he talks about the affective filter, And it helps us understand how emotion blocks language input. So when learners don't feel safe or confident, um, it doesn't matter how great your lesson is because the input's just not getting through. And so Stephen Krashen talks about three main areas, and they are motivation, anxiety, and self-confidence. And so, excuse me, when these affective filters are high, so when our anxiety is high or when our self-confidence, if we're feeling that it's that we're not as self-confident as we could be, our self-esteem is being impacted. So by self-confidence, we mean self-esteem. And what our motivation is being impacted, a belief in one's own abilities or our intrinsic, extrinsic motivation, those factors, when they're high, it creates a filter. And so the input can't get through the filter. It's kind of like walls go up, and it makes language learning or really learning anything a lot more difficult. So in essence, when we're feeling anxiety, fear, embarrassment, it's less likely and more difficult for language acquisition to occur. And if you think about this, we are teaching learners, or learners who are in our classrooms have been on quite a journey before they arrive in our classrooms. They're carrying probably a lot of emotional baggage with them. If we can imagine them carrying a backpack and what's inside their backpack, their anxiety might be high. They might have left their entire family back in their home country and they've come to Canada or somewhere to learn English. And so they're already feeling like those emotions are quite triggered. And so it's really important for us as teachers to create classroom environments where we can intentionally act to lower those affective filters, which will then increase language input and learning. So the more we can focus on creating a safer, psychologically, emotionally safe environment, the lower the affective filters will be. And that's exactly where social emotional learning can help. And studies show that SEL, I'll just refer to it as SEL for the rest of the talk. So when I say SEL, I'm referring to social emotional learning. It has outcomes that are related to not only emotional skills, academic performance, mental well-being, and outside of school, it can have lifetime benefits, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And so I just think that this is really timely for us to be talking about, especially with the increase of AI. Not only are our learners probably feeling a little unsteady and uncertain, but you as teachers might be feeling that way as well. So this is a way of bringing the human side back into the classroom. So now that I've talked about, affective filters, and our job really is to create an environment where we lower those, and I'm saying SEL is the way to do it, let's talk about what SEL is. I have a brief definition that I'm going to bring up on the screen. But it's essentially a framework that helps learners build the confidence, regulate emotion, collaborate, and make responsible decisions. It's about helping our learners show up, not just linguistically, but emotionally in our classroom as well. And like I said, you can imagine what they're experiencing with that little backpack on when they come to class. And there are 5 main core social emotional competencies, which I'm going to bring up in a moment. But I just want you to understand generally that they are broad concepts and they're interrelated. So if I'm talking about one, you might say, oh, well, I think that, excuse me, I think that, you know, um, self-awareness and self-management are both evident in this particular task. And that could be right because they're all interrelated. But I'm going to walk us through some examples in the connection series so you can see these SEL competencies in action. But before I do that, I think it's really important for you to know what the 5 is. Okay. I just got to make sure my little T-Rex hands are in the screen. So 5 competencies are my next screen, and I'll outline what they are. So KSOL it's a really good resource. I'm going to put a link in the chat in a moment because I know as soon as I do, you're going to go off to that link and then I won't have your attention anymore. So the 5 are self-awareness, And that's the ability to understand one's emotions, thoughts, strengths, limitations, and how they influence behavior. We also have self management. This is the ability to regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors effectively in different situations in order to achieve goals or aspirations. And then we have social awareness. It's the ability to understand the perspectives of others and empathize with those, including people from diverse backgrounds and different cultures and contexts than you. Then we have relationship skills, the ability to establish and maintain healthy and supportive relationships, and to effectively navigate settings with diverse individuals and groups. And the last one is responsible decision making. Sorry. This is the ability to make caring and ethical and constructive choices about personal behavior and social interactions across diverse situations. All right, so those are the five. Take a moment just for a second and think about, excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water. Think about those five and which one do you think it maybe comes most naturally to you? You don't have to type it in the chat, just think for a moment. Okay. And I'm talking about these five social emotional competencies because I'm thinking, well, what if we're missing half of the curriculum? You know, and from a language teaching perspective, our lesson plans cover vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, functional skills. But how do we build for belonging or emotional safety or confidence under pressure and navigating group dynamics? And I just think that's the hidden part. That's the other half of that curriculum. So if we talk about the 50% being brain work, that's learning our functional language, our vocabulary. And then there's the other 50, which is that heart side or that emotional side. It's our emotional readiness to be able to speak and have conversations. Okay. I did mention before that there are many benefits to introducing SEL into your classroom. And I will just, I preface this by saying that SEL does not replace the need for mental health interventions. It can increase mental well-being, but for students who need it, still reach out for those mental health interventions that you need. This has proven to have it can develop more caring relationships and supportive relationships in the classroom, which then can buffer against mental health risks, but it does not replace the need for interventions if necessary. So I just want to put that out there that I'm not a counselor, I'm not certified in any way, so I'm not proposing that this would replace any of that. It's just a way of creating a more positive attitude in the classroom, more positive self-attitude, and it can then decrease discipline problems or some mental health issues as they're showing up. So SEL has the ability to enhance young people or all people's coping skills, resiliency, emotional identification. So when I showed you the emoji grid when we started, that was a way for you to tune in and ask yourself, how am I feeling today? Let's put not a word to that emotion, but a face to that emotion, And it's something that I don't think that we put enough time and energy into in the classroom because being able to openly talk about our feelings and even have the language or the emojis to identify what they are can reduce symptoms of depression, anxiety, and things like that in the short term. So it can reduce those affective filters. And the research says that students participating in classroom activities where SEL has been a focus point, they report having better relationships with teachers and stronger feelings of belonging in the classroom, but not only in the classroom, but more inclusiveness in the school itself. SEL can also contribute to reductions in bullying and aggression. And then also with academic success, now we did talk about reducing those effective filters, which means that language input and language acquisition can be more successful. But in building an environment like that, it supports learners' confidence. And when they're feeling more confident, they feel like they have more strengths and more abilities. And so it becomes this cycle of can do's instead of can't do's. Um, and we know that also future readiness is something where students have reported seeing improvements in social emotional skills so that they have stronger bonds in their friendships in and outside of classrooms. And we know that social emotional skills can contribute to like a lifetime of positive outcomes. And this includes students being more likely to graduate from programs or high school, to enroll in post-secondary education, and then to then obtain stable full-time employment. And then we have teacher well-being. So there's a growing body of evidence that demonstrates that focusing on educator social emotional competence can also improve teacher well-being, and I'm going to talk more about that later. And so not only can it increase your teacher well-being, but it can also lead to less feelings of burnout, feeling like you have more control over your job. It can also help you build and maintain stronger relationships with students, have easier classroom management. And so there are a lot of benefits to focusing on SEL. And you're probably wondering now, okay, cool, but how do I integrate it into my classroom? So I have some ideas here for you. And there are three main methods for integrating SEL into your classroom. And one of them is those that are taught isolated from the regular curriculum. So you would create a separate program that is all about learning those human skills, those soft skills, and learners would take that in addition to whatever language or skill that they're learning. I'm not going to talk about that one today because it's not one that I really recommend. It takes a lot of effort to create a curriculum specifically for that. And then it becomes a little bit of an assessment nightmare where how are you assessing students' ability to improve their self-confidence? And so I'm not going to go down that path today, but instead I'm going to talk about the other two, those that are demonstrated by the teacher and those that are taught integrated into daily lessons. And the first one, why should teachers develop their own social emotional learning competencies? And I say that it's because you're the biggest SEL tool in the room. Students are watching how you handle conflict, stress, failure. You're modeling your own personal emotional regulation and empathy and communication every day. They're watching you in action. Whether you know it or not, they're watching you and you're a model for them. Okay, so I introduced this before. So what cell behavior do you already model well? And then now I want to just ask you, while I take another sip of water, which one do you think you would like to strengthen a bit more? And I am curious for those who are willing, if you could type it into the chat, because I'm just curious to see which one. Number two, self-management. Okay. I'm going to add to the self-management piece. It's hard for me because whenever I feel any type of extreme emotion, whether it's embarrassment, anxiety, stress, I blush. My whole face turns red, and so it's actually really difficult for me to hide when I'm feeling emotions because I just wear them on my sleeve. I turn into a little like 50 shades of red. But I'm seeing a lot of twos on the board, so thank you. I'm also seeing a hand up, so I don't mind pausing for a moment to answer a question. Yeah.
Oh, Shawna, is it my hand that you see?
It is, yes.
Okay. It's just to let you know that both Joanne Morin and I are unable to write in the chat.
Oh, okay.
So if you're getting fewer messages than you're anticipating, then it's probably, I don't know if we're the only two, but For some reason, it says we have been invited to the meeting, but we're unable to write anything.
Okay. Well, thank you
Okay,
for letting me know that.
no problem. Thank you.
And thank you to those who shared. I think the most common response that I saw was to self-management. And after the session is over, I'm going to figure out a way. I have a handout for everyone. It's a set of reflective questions that you can use to ask yourself for each of the 5 competencies. How am I showing self-awareness, or how can I build that? How am I showing self-management, or how can I build that? And so I do have a handout that I will share with you all. I haven't attached it to the chat yet. I tried to earlier and it wasn't working, so I will make sure that I find a way to get you the handouts for sure. Okay. And we're going to do now a gallery walk, because I'm talking about how to integrate these into your classroom. And I'm going to put in the chat a link. This is a website that I want you to go to in just a moment. The website's on the screen, but I'm also going to put it in the chat. And the reason why I'm putting it here is because if you go to the website and you scroll down a little bit, you'll actually be able to click on each one, like self-awareness, and it'll drop down if you're using your computer. It'll drop down and it'll give you some different ways that these show up. So not just this general definition, self-awareness, like being able to identify your emotions, but it'll actually break it down into a list of different ways that it'll show up. And I think it's really handy for you to have. So I'm just going to hit, oops, sorry. I'm going to back up for a second and see if I can get this to go through on the chat. All right, so the link should be there now. And I encourage you to bring it up, because what we're going to do in our gallery walk is I'm going to show you some different examples from the Connection series. And we're going to talk about, well, not really talk about, I'm going to talk at you. And you can type in the chat which one you think it most reflects. Is it self-awareness or responsible decision-making? And so having that resource on your screen just might be able to help you make your decision. Which one do I think is most being represented here? And then also, CASEL is a really good resource for you to have after the session to see more about social emotional learning. Again, it tends to be geared towards the K through 12 system, because a lot of the research out there is. So you'll just have to think, okay, well, how do I flip this and bring this into my language classroom? All right, so I'm going to dive into some examples. And here's our first one. This is from the Connections 6 book. And I don't expect you to be able to read everything on the screen really quickly, but instead I'm going to highlight some different parts. So here we have a listening lesson that's like, it's about how people helped others. And they're learning about Hurricane Katrina, and then discussing with their partner how likely they would be to help people in need, how and in what way. So I'm just going to ask you to type into the chat whether you think which competency this aligns itself with. Is it self-awareness, social awareness? Good. So I'm just seeing some things come in through the chat. Okay. Social awareness. Thank you. Give me one moment. Okay. All right, so I'm seeing some thumbs up to that, and I'll just count us down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, that looks like it's the most popular answer. And yeah, social awareness. And so this is our ability to empathize with others. And it can show up in ways of taking other people's perspectives or demonstrating empathy and compassion, which I think is very, very clear in this lesson. And then in that group discussion, with your partner, how likely would you be to help, how and why? And it helps us understand the way other people see things as well. Okay, so I have a few more examples. Here's our next one. This is from Connections 1. So right down at the beginning level of the textbook series, we can see that social emotional learning has been integrated into the textbook. So I just have some highlights for you. We're looking at how to start, continue, and end a conversation. And then they watch a life skills video, which is people meeting for the first time. And then they can make a list of questions to bring into a practice conversation with a partner. So which competency do you think this most aligns itself with? I'll just get someone to type in the chat. Relationship skills. Okay, so I'm seeing some responses come in. Okay, and it looks like relationship skills is the most popular one, so we'll just count us down to make sure I give us enough time. And 1. And our answer is relationship skills. Yeah, so it's building healthy and supportive relationships and then being able to navigate different cultural demands and with learning how to have a conversation in different contexts, because then you can open the discussion to say, okay, this is how we typically start a conversation. Let's say here in Canada, what is it like in your country, and things like that. So again, relationship skills looks at how we might resolve conflicts, resist negative pressure, how we can do collaborative problem solving, asking for help, and things like that. So those are some items that you would have seen on the KSEL website if you were able to access it. So different ways of how relationship skills show up. Okay, another example from Connections 5. So I'll just highlight some things here. This is another listening lesson. Why do you think each of these actions that happened are unethical? Let's talk about 3 unethical online behaviors, and then with your partner, discuss how you think they should be handled. So again, let's type in the chat what social emotional competency we think this most aligns itself with. Responsible decision making. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you for sending me some responses. For those of you who can type in the chat. Okay, yeah, I'm just going to reveal our answer here. Responsible decision making. Again, we're talking about the consequences of various behaviors or personal actions. We're looking at making, judgments here, anticipating consequences, recognizing how our critical thinking skills are useful both in and outside of the classroom. And again, we're looking at ethics and things like that. Okay, I have a few more. I'm just keeping an eye on the time because I want to make sure we can get through things. So I might skip through a couple of examples. This is another one from Connections 5, but let's do it. This is from a watching, so this is a video lesson, and we're looking at how you spend your time. Do you think you have enough time to spend with your family, cook all your meals and things like that? Then you can look at how to downsize your task list once you've identified how many tasks it is that you have to complete in a week. And then maybe discussing what it would look like or cost to outsource some of those tasks. So what do we think here? I'm seeing a self-management come up in the chat. Okay, good. Self-management. Of course, there's a self-awareness aspect because you have to look in before you can start to look out. But again, yes, they're interrelated broad competencies, but self-management is here. Okay, and then this one is Connection 6. It's from a writing lesson. And I'm just highlighting here. So what evidence can you find in the description of this NGO, of any concerns that you might have about the NGO? And then if you were to donate money, you're writing a letter and outlining for them what needs to be done in order for them to receive your money. So what do we think here? Which social emotional competency? Social awareness. Yeah. Okay. And I'm seeing some thumbs up for that one as well, which is good. This is another one of those examples where absolutely social awareness because we're talking about an NGO, but then also you're invited, like you're making judgments and you're looking at the evidence. So in order for me to decide to send you my money, I'm asking that you have to do a couple of things. So the answer that I have here is responsible decision making, but I 100% agree with you in an interrelated way that social awareness is also a big part of this. But again, they're reading and they're gathering evidence in order to make a decision based on that evidence. And so that's where the responsible decision making comes in. I think we have enough time for a couple more examples. This one is from Connections 2, and this is a project. So at the end of each unit in the Connections series, it ends with a collaborative project. And for this one, they're talking about ways to stay healthy, and then making a list of problems like sleep, stress, fitness, health, or other general wellness. And then they're proposing activities that might help with it. So just quickly, which was self-management. Okay, yep, I'm seeing that one come up. And you're absolutely right. Um, absolutely. Okay. Oh, and I have another project here. This is from Connections 4. And it's about team building activities. So the whole project is about performing different team building activities and then being able to reflect on how it went with your team. How are you able to perform the team building activity? What changes would you make if you were working on a team again in the future? Relationship skills. Okay. So I'm speeding up just a little bit, but yeah, absolutely. Okay, and I think I have a couple more, and I'm just going to skip through them here. So Connections 3, we've got another self-awareness one. Okay, I skipped the last one. And how do you audit your materials? So I used Connections because I mean I'm slightly biased towards it because I was an author on the team. But if you're not using Connections in your classroom currently, then how do you audit the materials? So instead of creating separate lesson plans that are teaching self-awareness and self-management, how can you just look at what you have to determine, okay, do I see any social emotional competencies there? So I have some reflective questions on the next slides, but then also I have a handout that I can share that has like a full set of auditing questions for you. So does it have opportunities for students to reflect on their emotions or the emotions of others? Are there activities that encourage collaboration and teamwork? Does the material incorporate culturally sensitive or empathy building activities? Are there elements that help students set goals or self-assess or celebrate progress? And does the material address managing challenges, stress, or setbacks? So those are just a couple of questions that you can just ask yourself. So if you open your textbook in your classroom and you can say, okay, this is the lesson I'm doing today. What could I highlight here as a social emotional competency to help build those skills outside of the classroom? And I do have a handout, like I said, that I will share. And then if you're not sure about activities that you can do, I also have a handout that just has a list of different SEL activities. Like one that is very commonly used is I think pair share. You get independent reflection time. You can partner with someone to discuss in a low risk conversation and then share with a larger group where the stakes get a little bit higher, where maybe your anxiety gets a little bit higher. And so that thinking and that pairing helps prepare you for um, for before you're sharing with a big group. And that's a way that you can lower that affective filter. So that's just one example of something that we do without even really thinking about it as a teacher, how many benefits a small activity like that can have. I'll look into ways to incorporate more SEL activities in my lessons. That's great. Yeah, a simple activity, even just to think pair share is a really good start. Or if you want to borrow my emoji grid, borrow my emoji grid. Not mine, Eric Bailey's emoji grid. Let me give credit. You can audit your next lesson plan. So that's something that we talked about. It's pretty easy to do. What are you going to do tomorrow in your lesson? And is there something that you can squeeze in there? Add in reflection questions about emotions. How did that discussion make you feel? Or, you know, the author's opinion in that particular article. More structured group work. I'm seeing that come through in the chat. That's great. Yeah. Structure it. Give people roles. Have them reflect on their roles. How did you perform that role? What would you do differently next time? And then ask students, what's one way you want to feel more confident this week? Just ask them. And then they might be able to reflect on what you did to see if it worked, if they were able to achieve that. And then my last slide is just to end off where we started with my emoji grid. And I'll get you to type into the chat, now that you've had this talk, how are you feeling? H3. Let me see what H3 is. Starry-eyed. Ooh, I take it. A6. Let's take a look. Okay. Yay. B1. Smiley face. Yes. E3 still, but an A1 too. I like that. I will take it. So yeah, that is the end. I just want to thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you joining me on this social emotional journey. And if you have more questions about SEL or professional development or trauma informed practices, like I mentioned earlier, feel free to reach out. My personal email is there on the screen. And then, of course, if you have questions about the Connections series, there's lots of people on the call that can help you. But if you're outside of Quebec, you can talk to Bill, and his email's on the screen as well. We can type those into the chat for you. I will make sure as soon as I stop sharing my screen that I can see if I can upload those handouts for you. And we're going to start a Q&A.